Hello there and welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at self-reviewing and making a couple of fine-tuned adjustments for any mistakes we might find. So let's hop into Nuke. Before we go on to our first self-review, there is something we're currently missing, and that's motion blur. Whenever there's an object that's moving in our footage, it's going to smear, whether that's because the object itself is moving or the camera is moving. Let's take a quick look at what that looks like in our practical footage. We'll go into our tracker here and we'll make a stabilize. That'll just use the inverse of our tracking data so that it doesn't move. We can take a look at these branches here. Now, where I'm expecting to see this is largely when the camera is tilting, and that's in this frame range. And you can actually see it kind of choking in on itself there, and that's the smeariness that I'm talking about. That is partially pixel filtering, but it is also motion blur. And so how do we apply motion blur to our element? Let's go here. You can see our element. This is likely going to be pretty subtle, but all we need to do is go to this motion blur tab, change it to 1, and you can see the smeariness appear. And it's calculating this based on how it's moving. The shutter is set to 0.5. 0.5 is the equivalent of a 180 degree shutter or a 1/48th shutter in this case. Typically, the shutter is set to 0.5, so this is a good default unless you know otherwise. In the shutter knob in the transform node, increasing it to 1 will increase the amount of motion blur, and lowering it will decrease the amount of motion blur. You can see that if we just slide this around here. But we'll just keep this at 0.5 because that's a good default. The shutter offset defaults to start. And what exactly does this mean? Let's do a quick demonstration here. We'll just take a roto node off to the side. We'll look at the alpha. We'll hide all of these others. We'll draw an ellipse. All right. We'll add a transform node. We'll set a keyframe here. We'll go forward 2 frames and we'll just move this -200. You set keyframes in Nuke by clicking on this little sine wave looking widget here and hitting set key. And now we have a moving sphere. So let's turn our motion blur on, this middle frame here. So start is saying where my object is, I want that to be the start of the smear. Centered is saying I want this to be in the middle of the smear. And end is saying I want this to be the last point of the smear. Cameras typically will be on centered. And so that's what we're going to use here. But if your track looks off, but you're like, I'm very sure this is sticking, it's potentially because of your shutter offset. We're going to change our match move since that's the one that's actually moving around. Go to centered. And now we have motion blur in our clip. We'll hide that. All right, so we have our first version. Let's get to self-reviewing. So I think this is looking pretty good right out of the gate. A couple things we want to check. First and foremost is the track, because it's possible something's wrong, but we just can't really tell right now. So let's pause this and stabilize it. Again, stabilization is the best way to see if your track is actually working like you think it is. I'm just going to use the same one we made earlier. We'll hide our overlays. And let's hit play. All right, now this is previewing. Now let's just scrub back and forth. I'm seeing some slipping happening in this area over here. Yeah, it looks like the right side of frame is not sticking. You can see it sliding in these trees back here. You can see it sliding in this tree. I think like our mountains over here look pretty sticky. I'm not really noticing anything there. So we're definitely going to have to update our track. Let's check our grain next to make sure everything's working there, because it's possible that the motion blur that we've added is kind of smoothing this out too much. And I just want to look at the section where the camera's tilting down. And so we're just going to isolate that area. I'm going to hit O to set an out point and I to set an in point. Let's take a look at this. It doesn't look too smeary to me. I think this is working. I'm going to drag this a little further so we can see more. And let's also look at it without the stabilize. Just going to look at the bottom of frame here. Yeah, I'm not really noticing too many issues with the grain, so I think we can call that good for now. So let's get on to fixing that track. So the issue is largely that although the mountain point is very sticky that we've created here, scrubbing through, let's clear the in and out points. You can just hit O twice and I twice, and that'll clear them. And although that point is very sticky, there's a little bit of parallax happening here, and that's just not sticking. So we're going to want to get a track for over here. So we're going to use this tracker node we have here and add another track because we want this point to stick and also a point over here to stick and be consistent throughout. So we're going to need the translation of this point and this point, but to get those correctly, we need the movement of this point, and we're going to need to rotate so that this point stays in line as well, and potentially scale a little bit as well. So let's go ahead and turn off that center, hide our stabilize, and let's add another track. I want to track this house. And so another way of creating a track is by clicking this button in the top left here. So I clicked there, and now I'm going to click on our house, and we've created our new track. All right, let's adjust our area. We're just going to search for this point here, and let's track forward. Cool. That looks nice and sticky. We'll go back to our point here, and we'll track backwards. So it looks like our house went off frame, so we're going to need to offset this. Let's find the last frame that it's sticky on. It starts to get a little shaky around there, so we will end here. We'll clear backwards our keyframes. When an object goes off screen, you're going to want to track a different area that is moving exactly the same as your original track point. Thankfully, we're tracking this house that's on mountains that are super far away, so we can really track any of these mountains and be fine. So in order to offset our track, we control, click, and drag. Let's track the top of this tower here. And I'm control clicking to adjust this a little more asymmetrically. And let's just track backwards. Okay, looks like that went off frame. Starts getting a little bumpy there, it looks like. Bring this down so we can see the full extent. Yeah, it's getting bumpy as it gets nearer to the edge of frame because we're losing pixel data. So we'll stop this here. Let's click on track 1. I want this to go the same distance because we know this works with our footage too. Track 1 goes to frame 43, it looks like, so we're going to need another 7 frames. So let's just grab the top of this mountain and we'll say that will be the end of it. Move that up. And we'll go 1 frame at a time by using track previous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, and let's just scrub through. Look pretty sticky to me. Looks like here it may drift up a little, but this is the stabilized. I don't think that'll be a problem. So now if we want to implement this into our current track, what we need to do is check these boxes here. What our match, move, and stabilize are currently doing, they're reading this information here and trying to see what data they should be using. Right now, we're only exporting our translation data, our X and Y data from track 1, but we want that from track 2, and also our rotation and scale data. So now if we look at our match move here, we have rotation information and scale information. And the end goal of information in these two areas is to have both of the points that we tracked stick throughout the shot. So let's go ahead and check this out. All right, on first glance, it seems like nothing went disastrously wrong, so that's good. Let's check it now with our stabilize to make sure everything is working as we expect. Put our stabilize here. And since we have our stabilize also expression linked, it's going to auto update with our rotation information. So you can tell as this is previewing, it's already much more stable. All right, so let's see the results. Let's go to our troublesome areas here. All right, this is much better. Much, much better. We're not really seeing any sliding there at all. Let's make sure nothing happened on our left side. So it does look like there's a little bit of ghosting here. We can double check that that's not on the original footage. But yeah, it looks like that's something we're doing. So we're going to need to fix that. Something I also noticed as we were previewing here. Nope, that's in the footage. It looked like there's a little bit of a light spot, but if it's in the plate, it's not our problem. So let's look into fixing this area here a little bit. Let's go into our roto. We're going to go to where our keyframe is, and we're just going to change where our blending is happening. I think I can lower it a little bit. I can also potentially cheat this in so we're not seeing that blend, because this tree is really the only thing that's giving us away. I'm hoping that we won't really notice if there's a little bit of ghosting right here. So we can hide this, full screen it, we'll play it again. All right, now it looks like our ghosting is gone. But as we fix one problem, we've created another. This actor's head is getting semi-transparent as he's moving up. I also don't like how much we can see that blowing around, so maybe we can change our merge point and see if we can come up with something a little bit better. Can move this up and over a little more. It looks like because of this feather we have, we're going to have this little ghosting problem no matter what. So what I want to do is we can just make another roto node by hitting O. And I'll just draw in, because it's fine if everything else is blending a little bit, but we really need the actor's head to be solid. We can I know I said I don't like the nuke feather, but I think in this case, we're going to do it a subtle enough amount where it will be fine. We'll just do that really quick. And we'll preview our shot. All right, great, let's check it out. Let's go to our problem area here. All right, I don't really see any seams here. Let's just turn our effect off and on to make sure we're not introducing anything unwanted. A bean with the footage is always going to tell you if you've done something wrong. Looks like this is shifted a little, but I'm not too concerned about that because we're not losing the overall effect. All right, great. All right, there we go. I would say we have successfully completed our split screen task. It's looking really good. In our next video, we're going to look into adding a paint out and look into denoising and regraining footage. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.